The West Bloomfield Lakers football team remains perfect after a Week 3 victory over Rochester Adams at home at the Swamp. Here to talk about the Lakers' nail-biter of a victory in another classic at the Swamp on Friday is Laker football color commentator Matt Catoni. Matt, thanks for joining me.
Yep, thank you for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you on. The Lakers now 3-0 and 1-0 in the OAA Red following another nail-biter of a game against Rochester Adams. Very similar flavor to a year ago on the road in Rochester, this time around at West Bloomfield High School. 12-6 victory in a very defensive matchup, and that's really what did stand out for the Lakers. Their front seven dominant once again against much tougher competition than they saw in the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I think the best way to describe this defense, kind of comes from what Jeremiah Benson said to the Detroit Free Press. They're different. This Lakers front seven is dominant, and, those first 2 weeks we kind of said they had been playing dominant and physical, but Rochester Adams was that first test, and they passed it with flying colors. Jeremiah Benson in particular flashing in that first drive, forcing a field goal attempt for Rochester Adams, which they missed, and that proved to be a very big difference in the game.
It did, and the Lakers were able to keep their foot on the gas. Even when they made some mistakes, their opening drive of the game didn't quite go very well. They had a punt that went way over Jackson Carver's head and put Rochester Adams in scoring position. Their defense came up big and shut down Adams, prevented any scoring on that particular drive, and were able to shift the momentum back to the offense, where this time around we saw a breakout game for Jamal Shakespeare.
Yeah, and going into this game, you asked the question, who are we going to see the Lakers kind of, start to lean on? Who are going to be those playmakers come OAA or red time? And we saw that Jamal Shakespeare is really going to be one of those focal points on offense for the Lakers. And on that touchdown drive, we saw how he can just move the ball downfield and make people miss.
He did, and he was excellent in this particular game on the ground. 75 yards rushing, including a touchdown early on in the game to break the Lakers' scoring in that game. 19 carries, 75 yards, about 4 yards per carry, less than he usually averages in the game throughout the season, right around 5 yards per carry, but got his second touchdown of the year, 155 yards rushing on the ground. Jamal Shakespeare quickly emerging as a quiet superstar for the Lakers in 2025. We've been looking at so many other players across the board like Joel Davis and Jackson Carver, their young quarterback in his first full season, who also continued to look extremely poised. And Carver's poise we've praised in the first 2 weeks coming into this game, Matt, but really we've seen that poise across the entirety of that young offense, executing at almost about 100% on Friday last week.
Yeah, really, it speaks to the leaders and veterans on this team, how they've been able to maintain their composure in some of these situations. Like you mentioned, snap goes over Carver's head. Rochester Adams gets the ball in favorable position. Lakers defense doesn't waver whatsoever. They hold them to a field goal, they miss, and the offense reciprocates. They just feed off one another, and you never really see them fold in moments where, something doesn't go their way. The next play, they're hitting back that much harder.
And something that Coach Hilbers had mentioned after the game in their post-game scrum, he praised the players. He said he has not seen as good of a week of practice from those players in a very long time. They had a perfect week of practice, and that translated to their game against Rochester Adams, and because of that, they end up coming out with a win. Once again, we see at the end of that game, about 10, maybe 11 minutes left in the ball game, Rochester Adams has the football. They hold the football for a sustained drive. They march into Laker territory. They're starting to threaten the red zone again, and it's starting to look like, oh no, could this be a similar result to a year ago where it's 14-14 throughout much of that second half after a scoreless first half, and it's just a war of attrition. We know that is Coach Petrito's strategy, especially in close games late in the game. We saw the Lakers, like you said, not lose that confidence, stay focused. That speaks to a very veteran defense led up front by Tank Pittman and Jeremiah Benson.
Yeah, and really going into this game, you knew a lot of the onus was going to go on Pittman and Jeremiah Benson with how this Rochester Adams offense operates, and they did not disappoint yet again. And that's the thing with this Lakers team. It's almost as if they're scorned from a year ago, kind of getting pushed around by some of these teams like Rochester Adams, and or the state champions Catholic Central, and you've seen them almost toughen up in the trenches, and they just invite that kind of mentality and sort of offenses to come at with them.
Yet the Lakers now firmly atop the OAA Red division, 1-0 alongside Clarkston, also 1-0 in the division, but their overall record, the Lakers, the final undefeated team in their overall record in the OAA Red division. Clarkston, one sole loss on the season, as does Oxford and Rochester Adams now after this loss. And now the Lakers will go on the road to take on a team that's really been struggling and has on top of that had some serious injury problems in Lake Orion. It's easy for the Lakers to go into a game like this confident at 3-0 after beating a team like Rochester Adams and maybe let their foot up off the gas, especially against a team that's had some injury woes and has really not had a whole lot to be confident about in these first 3 weeks. But Matt, it's a whole different ball game after 3 home games where you've been dominant to go on the road, especially to a place with as passionate of a fan base as Lake Orion.
Yeah, you mentioned the home field advantage for the Lakers so far, giving up 2 points per game, and the lone touchdown being, a phenomenal play by DeWood, and really just sort of something you can live with because it wasn't necessarily a breakdown in coverage, rather a perfect throw and a phenomenal play from the receiver. But going on to the road this week, I think, again, it comes back to something Hilbers has always loved to preach, and that's, not getting too caught up in the moment and preparing the best you can and just doing what you can and live in beating your opponent no matter what.
It's a good litmus test for this team, too, to see how they react to all the highs and to all the lows of a season, because any one of these teams in the OAA Red is capable of sneaking up on you and giving you a surprise game. In past years, when Oxford's been one of those teams that has never really been expected to be one of the best in the OAA Red division, they've always given West Bloomfield a tough game, to the point where I always will refer to Oxford as the big blue trap game. This is one of those also with Lake Orion. They have been in the game in some regards, but have been very unfortunate with the injuries that have come into play. They have a different quarterback this year. It's tough to replace T.R. Hill, but that's not to say that they've been out of these games. All 3 of their games have been single-digit differences. Week 1, a near win against Northville and a nail-biter that came down to the last couple of possessions, 13-14 loss. 2 weeks ago against Stony Creek in Lake Orion, their first home game of the season, 9-point loss, 20-29. Last week, despite all their efforts, they go on the road, a tough environment against a team that's really building well in Rochester. They only lose that game by 2 points, despite having the outcome that they had with all the injuries that even occurred during that game last week. They've looked a little bit disjointed at times, have the Dragons, but this is a team that's still in the mix, and so really key for the Lakers to come into that game and play their best football. They're certainly confident, Matt, after last week's game, and they're playing as one very cohesive unit. That plays a big role, too, especially when you start to get into the thick of the season and face some of that common adversity.
Yeah, and really that's one thing about the OAA Red. You mentioned, Lake Orion battling some injuries. All these teams are very talented throughout their depth chart, and nobody really cares what you did last week or what your record is. So each week it's really a battle and almost a playoff environment for these OAA Red games, and that's why the Lakers are going to have to maintain their discipline and focus, because that can kind of be the deciding factor in some of these games.
One thing they're not missing is togetherness and a sense of leadership. This is a team that plays for each other. Very evident. We had a super special moment at the end of last week's game. So State Champs was on the broadcast. Patty Cesarini was their sideline reporter. She's interviewing Coach Hilbers after the game. We were running the PA and the scoreboard over there. After a huge win like that, Dave Scott from our team put that interview up on the scoreboard. It got the attention of the players, and that led to this very special moment at the Swamp.
What do you have to say about the way your defense played this entire game?
They really stepped up. They started stepping up in the weight room in January, and all summer they worked really hard, and I think the confidence has kind of carried over. They're a great team. Adams is a great team, great program, and they're resilient. They had some kids go down, and they were still driving at the end of the game, putting pressure on us, but our guys have responded time and time again, and I'm really, really proud of them.
Oh, and there they are now.
A big celebration for the Lakers after their 12-6 victory last week, Matt. They got a lot to be happy about. They got a lot to still look forward to with a tough outlook going forward. We saw some big steps forward from week 1 to week 2. We saw some even bigger steps forward from week 2 to week 3 as the Lakers continue in this Red Division schedule and face Lake Orion this week with Birmingham Groves looming on the other side. What's the next step you're looking for the Lakers to take in week number 4?
Well, I would like to see them kind of expand the offense, a little bit more, see them kind of establish themselves more on offense. Rochester Adams, obviously, tremendous defense, well-coached team. Lake Orion struggling a little bit. We know the defense is legit. It'd be nice to kind of see one of those games now where in the OAA Red, the offense kind of takes off and puts some points up on the board.
Yeah, looking to see some of those athletes get some yards after the catch. A little bit of action for the Lakers. Willie Edwards on 2 receptions this year. It's been a couple of bomb passes. He's averaging 22 yards. He's averaging 37 yards, mind you, per reception. He averaged 22 in that game against Rochester Adams. But a lot of these guys had slower games last week, hoping to get back to more of what we saw in those first 2 weeks next week. Part of that's just the strategy of how it all shook out in a very tough matchup that required both teams to maintain the possession of the ball, run the football a lot. I'm looking to see the receiving core get back in the game week number 4 at Lake Orion. We're not going to be on the broadcast this week. It's going to be our friends at Orion Neighborhood TV on the broadcast, and it's only going to be on the NFHS network. You'll have to subscribe in order to watch that game through Lake Orion's team apparatus. We'll put a link to where you can get onto the NFHS network to see that game on our Lakers sports page on CivicCenterTV.com. Matt, before we let you go, anything else, any other points you want to make about the Lakers' 12-6 victory in week number 3 against Rochester Adams?
Yeah, I really think it was almost putting the entire state or the OAA Red on notice with how legit that this defense is and how just dominant that front 7 can be.
That is certainly the case after a 12-6 victory for the West Bloomfield Lakers, where after 115 minutes and 10 seconds of scoreless football, finally someone put some points on the board against the Lakers. They were able to shut out Rochester Adams for the remainder of that game afterward and start perhaps a new streak. We'll see how dominant that defense can be and how electric the offense can be as they get their first test on the road Friday, 7 o'clock at Lake Orion. Matt, thank you as always.
Thank you for having me.